Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and today we have drug out the old pin board and we are going to start discussing kettlebell program design. We get a lot of questions about how you program for kettlebells. There are a billion answers to that question. We are going to endeavor to start answering them from the simplest to the most complex. The simplest is to start with 5 basic kettlebell movements, because they're the ones that you're most likely to survive, and then organize those in a bunch of different ways. So behind me up here on the pin board, we have the most basic things that we should be doing. Swings, Turkish get-ups, which is the most popular way to do base programming, is to do swings twice a week and Turkish get-ups twice a week. I also recommend, because those are very short things independently, swings 10 minutes, Turkish get-ups 10 minutes, that's 20 minutes twice a week. That's only 40 minutes. I say, why not go ahead and throw in an extra 40 minutes and bump that day count up a little bit higher. And then I want people to focus on clean and press and squats. Now, there are a bunch of answers to how you can do this. All of these things can be moved around in different ways. The classic way to do this is to do swings and Turkish get-ups on one day, because you have a pure grind and you have a ballistic hip snap. Very simple. Essentially, you have a bench press and a deadlift, or an overhead press and a deadlift, depending on how you want to think about it. The other things that I want people to focus on are the other fundamental aspects. Clean and press. If you go and you read Arnold Schwarzenegger's Guide to Bodybuilding, the clean and press is an essential movement to build a truly Herculean physique. So that's always in there as well. And then, of course, a squat. There are a million versions of squats you can do with kettlebells. The ones that I like people to start with the most are deck squats or bottoms up goblet squats, because they are the squats that force the biggest range of motion for the least amount of actual load in the kettlebell. And then on the other days, we want people to actually recover. So the classic way, if you were to train in a gym and you were to do barbell training, this program would not change much. You would do, say, deadlift for 5 sets of 5. And then you would do, say, overhead press for 3 sets of 3 or something like that. And then the next day you might have squats. The thing that makes this different is that it's really a traditional, most basic gym program would be deadlift, squat, and press. We're breaking our presses up into 2 different types of presses, because we have a press that is also an ab and is also a get up, and then we have our clean and press. The thing that most people leave out of this equation when they're designing their program is actually the cool down. And this is something you see almost everywhere you go. If you go to a gym, you might get some version of a warm up. The classic is you go to a big box gym like 24-hour fitness and you pay a trainer and he just makes you walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes. He doesn't really put any thought to it, but you're generally sweating, so it kind of works out. We would like to put more thought into our warm-ups over time, but just think about those as having placeholders here. The thing that gets left out almost everywhere is cool down. Cool down is almost always left out. I'm not really sure why. It's probably because it's not sexy and everybody hates stretching. The point of the cool down is to actually re-lengthen the muscles after having contracted them. The heavier the weight you lift, the harder your muscles had to contract, the more likely they are to shorten over time. And that's kind of a classic thing that you see all the time with people who spend a lot of time at the gym but don't stretch. You'll see the arms that don't straighten all the way out anymore from doing so much bicep curling. And that's because most people have left cool down out of program design for a long period of time. And there's many reasons for that. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just, if we want to live a long time, then we need our joints to work as good as possible. The way that we keep our joints working as good as possible is to try to deload loaded joint structure after we have trained. So these are our fundamental things that we can do. And the one way to do it is the way we have it here. We have 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, and then 2 days off at the weekend. This is a fairly easy way to do this, and this is the way that you would structure a program for beginners. There's something else you can do here when you do this. You can flip the squat and the Turkish get-up. This becomes a little bit more like a classic gym program now, where you have your swing, which is your deadlift, and your squat, which is a squat, all on one day. So essentially now you have a leg day and you have a pressing day. Your clean and press is an overhead press, your Turkish get-up can be construed as a very elaborate bench press. So that's now our second option. The first option was that deadlift, bench press one day. The other day was squat overhead press. Now we are doing a leg day and a press day. You can continue to shift these things around as much as you want, but the goal is to try to not repeat two of the exact same things 2 days in a row. In the beginning of training, you would not put deadlift 2 days in a row. You would not put swing 2 days in a row. It just doesn't work out very well, and then you have 5 days in the week where you're not doing that. So when you're writing programs, this is kind of the fundamental of all the things that you would want to have. In the beginning of training, recovery is very important because recovery is where you're actually going to build muscle and develop athletically. You do the training. The training is not necessarily what makes you stronger or more athletic. It is the input, and then you go to sleep and your brain and your body get together and they decide that they should probably change something internally so that you can get stronger or faster or better. So the point of all of this design is that these have to be progressive programs. That means if you do 10 sets of 10 one day, you need to build up to 10 sets of 20, and then you need to get heavier weights. This can stay a 10-minute section of training for a very long period of time, for multiple years, if you have more weights. If you are limited to one weight, then you will have to expand the number of reps in the amount of time, or you will have to expand the amount of time you're actually doing the program. So a very simple way to think about this would be warm up 10 minutes, swings 10 minutes, squats 10 to 20 minutes, and cool down 10 minutes. Your cool down should be a minimum of 10 minutes. The older you get or the more injured you are, the longer the cool down portion of this whole thing goes. If you were to add in your sixth exercise, which would be snatch, you could either put it on Wednesday or you could put it on Saturday. For the most part, people usually put their snatch on Saturday because snatch is the absolute hardest on the hands. It's the hardest on the grip, it's the hardest on the abs, it's the hardest on the core. So you want to spend the majority of your time developing your fundamentals of everything else and letting your hands and your skin develop over time so that you can get to this snatch program. In the first year of training, most people don't do snatch training more than 1 day a week. You can, but that's not how most people do it. Because after snatch, usually everybody's hands are pretty trashed and they have to have time for their hands to recover. So usually an entire day off at least. The goal of doing snatch training is to make sure you don't rip your hands, because if you do rip your hands, you're out, kind of done for 10 to 14 days. And that's just not good. So we want to design all of this stuff so that we don't rip our hands. And if we rip our hands, that usually means something inside of our body is probably about to rip. So our hands are usually the canary in the coal mine, which let us know when everything is about to fall apart. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. And then you might shuffle these things around to put the least amount of load on your hands on this first day back. And you can do that any way you really want to do it. Usually the easiest thing on your hands is squats, because there's usually the least amount of transition as you're moving the weight around. If you're doing a bottoms up goblet squat, that is very, very specific because it shouldn't be moving around in your hands. Even if your hands are trashed from doing some other type of training, you should live through goblet squats fairly okay and continue to develop athletically strength, cardio, without the need for keeping your hands from falling apart. The second hardest activity after snatches is, of course, going to be clean and press because of the clean. There are lots of transitions where you're pivoting the kettlebell over your hand. So that's something you're going to want to think about. But you can move these things around in almost any way. There are many ways which I do it, which I prefer, but they float around quite a bit. So we're going to continue to talk about program design, and we're gonna make a lot of videos about it. You guys tell me exactly what questions you want me to answer, and we will start talking about where we can fit things in here, and then we'll start adding times to each thing and start just doing the math, figuring out how long a program is, and we're just gonna do basically Program Design University 101. It's gonna be fun. Maybe, I don't know. It could just be boring as hell. This has been Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica.